High above the lifeless salt plains of the Dead Sea stands a mesa, flat-topped and defiant, its edges falling steep into the surrounding sands. Masada. For centuries it remained silent, a fortress turned ruin, a monument turned legend. But beneath its ancient stones, echoes remain. Echoes of steel on stone, of cries in the dark, of oaths taken in blood. The year is 73 CE. The Roman Empire, vast and merciless, is nearing the final days of its long campaign to crush the Great Jewish Revolt. The heart of Judea is already broken. Jerusalem has fallen, and the Second Temple lies in ashes. Yet one final ember of resistance burns, smoldering atop Masada's barren cliffs, where nearly 1,000 rebels and their families make a last stand. These are the Sicarii, named for their daggers, zealots, fugitives, and survivors. They've taken refuge in a fortress once built by Herod the Great, a marvel of ancient engineering equipped with storerooms, cisterns, and towering walls. But they know what awaits them. Rome is coming. To understand why Masada became a battleground, we must look to the causes of rebellion. Judea had long been a troubled province within the Roman Empire. Though allowed to practice their religion, the Jews bristled under the weight of Roman taxation, governance, and cultural domination. In 66 CE, tensions reached a breaking point. Roman authorities seized temple funds in Jerusalem, sparking outrage. Riots erupted, and Roman troops were killed. Judea rose up in open revolt. The rebellion spread quickly, first to Galilee, then across the countryside. The Jewish people, fractured into sects, found unity in resistance. Yet that unity was fragile. Zealots, Pharisees, Essenes, and Sicarii fought a common enemy, but they fought each other too. Civil strife weakened the revolt, even as Rome marched closer. Still, the victories were real. An entire Roman legion destroyed, cities liberated. For a moment, freedom seemed possible. But Rome was never going to allow defeat. The emperor sent his best, Vespasian, and his son Titus, to restore control. They brought with them the fury of empire, steel, siege engines, and the relentless discipline of the legions. For years, the Romans laid siege to the rebellious cities of Judea. Vespasian crushed Galilee and Perea, while Titus turned his gaze to Jerusalem, the sacred heart of the Jewish people. In 70 CE, the siege began. The city, once magnificent, became a tomb. Inside the walls, desperation ruled. Factions fought each other as much as the enemy outside. Food ran scarce, then vanished. People starved, and stories of cannibalism spread. All the while, Roman siege towers and battering rams pressed against the ancient stones. At last, the wall broke. Roman soldiers poured in. What followed was slaughter. The Second Temple, epicenter of Jewish faith, was burned. its gold and marble stolen or destroyed. Tens of thousands were killed. The revolt was broken, but not extinguished. Scattered bands of rebels escaped the ruins. One such band, led by Eleazar Ben-Yor, made their way to Masada. Among them were warriors, women, children, those with nothing left but the will to defy. And Masada, Herod's mountain fortress, was their sanctuary. Masada had been abandoned for decades, yet it stood strong. Built by Herod as a refuge against rebellion, its location was perfect for defense, towering nearly 1,300 feet above the desert floor. With sheer cliffs on all sides, it was nearly impossible to storm. The Sicarii quickly restored the fortress. Cisterns filled with rainwater, granaries stocked with stores, watchtowers manned by sentries. Within weeks, they had transformed Masada into a functioning, fortified settlement. From their perch, they could see for miles every grain of sand, every glint of sunlight off Roman steel. And they waited. For 3 years, the mountain remained untouched. The Sicarii raided nearby Roman settlements, killing and capturing those they deemed traitors. They were both freedom fighters and feared extremists. In their view, compromise with Rome was treason, but the empire never forgets. In 72 CE, the 10th Roman Legion, Legio Ex Fretensis, under the command of Flavius Silva, was dispatched to end the resistance once and for all. They marched into the desert and laid eyes on the unyielding rock of Masada. Silva was no stranger to war. A seasoned commander, he understood what brute force alone could not achieve. Patience would. The Roman legions encircled the plateau, cutting off all escape. 8 camps were constructed, connected by a circumvallation wall nearly 2 miles long. But siege engines were useless against Masada's heights. The cliffs could not be climbed. So Silva did what Romans always did. He built. At the western end of the mountain stood a natural slope, the White Spur. It was here the Romans began construction of a siege ramp. Day by day, slaves, soldiers, and engineers hauled stones and earth, forming a massive earthen embankment. It took months. The defenders watched helplessly as death rose steadily toward them. They fired arrows, hurled rocks, but could not stop it. Inside Masada, the Sicarii prepared. They held councils. Eleazar Ben-Yor, their leader, preached defiance. To surrender meant slavery or crucifixion. To fight meant death. But it would be a death on their own terms. As the siege ramp neared completion, the people within Masada turned inward. Life under siege was quiet but heavy with dread. Children played among the stones. Women cooked, prayed, and waited. Warriors trained and sharpened blades, knowing they may never use them in victory. They knew the end was near. Supplies were measured and rationed. Every day the ramp grew taller, wider. Every night brought fresh debates. Should they fight, surrender, or die free. Eleazar's speeches grew more intense, more desperate, as hope thinned. To many, Masada was no longer just a fortress. It was the last free place on earth. They had fled Jerusalem to escape death, only to find it waiting atop this mountain. And yet, in that crucible of despair, they found a strange kind of strength. Faith hardened into resolve. Families spoke in hushed tones about legacy and God's will. Masada had become a tomb of choice, and that choice, freedom or slavery, loomed ever closer as the Roman tower neared the wall. The night before the siege tower reached the wall, silence consumed Masada. The wind blew cold across the ramparts. Eleazar gathered his people and spoke, not as a warrior, but as a father, a husband, a son of Judea. He called upon them to make the ultimate decision. He argued that death by their own hand was nobler than a life of chains under Rome. He invoked scripture, liberty, and dignity. That night, many wept, many prayed, and one by one they agreed. They would not be taken alive. They drew lots. 10 men were chosen to kill the others, wives, children, friends, quickly and painlessly. Then one man from among the 10 would kill the remaining 9, and finally take his own life. It was a plan forged in agony. By dawn, the flames of their homes rose into the sky. When the Romans breached the walls, they expected chaos, but found only stillness and ash, and the bodies of the dead, every single defender, save a handful who hid. The Romans were stunned. Flavius Silva had claimed victory, but it was hollow. There was no triumph, no captives, no battle, just silence. Masada was taken, but its people had robbed Rome of their suffering. The cost was too high for conquest. News of Masada spread slowly. Josephus, the Jewish historian who had defected to the Roman side, wrote of the mass suicide with horror and admiration. His accounts, though colored by politics, preserved the story for generations. But questions remained. Had it really happened that way? Could an entire community end itself so completely? Or had Josephus crafted a narrative to fit Roman tastes? Archaeological excavations would come centuries later to search for answers. Still, Masada became more than a story. It became a symbol of defiance, of faith, and of the terrible choices war forces upon the oppressed. A symbol that would echo far beyond its scorched stone walls. In the 20th century, Masada rose again, this time in memory. When the State of Israel was born in 1948, Masada was adopted as a national myth. Young soldiers climbed the mountain and swore oaths. Masada shall not fall again. To some, it was a call to resilience. To others, it glorified extremism. Debates flared in universities, museums, and parliaments. Was Masada a noble stand or a tragic waste? Was Eleazar a hero or a fanatic? Even archaeologists disagreed. Excavations uncovered storerooms, weapons, and coins, but little direct evidence of mass suicide. The truth of that final night remains part history, part legend, forever suspended in the desert air. Yet, whether myth or reality, Masada endures. A reminder that even when the sword has fallen, the story remains, and that sometimes the most powerful resistance is to deny your enemy your soul. Today, Masada stands as both ruin and monument. Tourists walk its stone paths, birds nest in the cracks. Tour guides speak in dozens of languages, telling the tale of the mountain that defied an empire. The desert has not reclaimed it. The wind has not erased it. Masada remains etched into stone, into scripture, and into identity. It speaks not just of the past, but of humanity's timeless struggle between freedom and fear. The siege is over. The flames have long died. But if you stand there atop the mountain and listen closely, you may still hear it, a whisper in the wind, a cry of defiance, a name, Masada. As the sun rises once more over the silent cliffs of Masada, the wind whispers through stone ruins, echoes of courage, defiance, and sacrifice. The siege may have ended nearly 2,000 years ago, but the story of Masada lives on, not in the triumph of empire, but in the resolve of those who chose death over slavery, who believed that freedom, even in its final breath, was worth fighting for. Masada is not just a place, it is a symbol, a mirror held up to every generation that must choose between submission and resistance, silence and voice, survival and principle. What happened atop this fortress was not the end of a war, but the beginning of a memory. One carved not into marble monuments, but into the conscience of history itself. If this story moved you, if you believe the past still speaks to our present, then honor it. Like this video, subscribe for more deep dives into ancient history, and share this with someone who should know what happened here, because Masada shall not fall again, not in memory.